So being seen on the internet may bring flashy international jobs, but most of the work I do is in Glasgow, and being seen locally is just as important. It's a cliche, but no less true for being one, that it's who you know as much as what you know. But that doesn't mean you have to be privileged, it just means that you have to make an effort to know people. I spent most of last year going out, pubs, clubs, fashion shows, gallery openings, lectures, and I started doing this because I enjoyed it, but then I started to realise that it was bringing me work through the people that I met while I was out. Sometimes though this just happens by chance. For example, in the summer of 2006 I went for a drink with an actor friend and we bumped into a friend of his, Stuart Lang, Tony Award winning data director. This was before the days when I gave out business cards, but 3 years later Stuart emailed me and asked me to photograph a show he was directing. Months later I worked with him again on a production he was directing for Scottish Opera, Lab OM. Since then Scottish Opera have given me regular commissions, and the costume designer of Lab OM went on to do a show for Cryptic Theatre. He recommended my work to the people there, and that's how I came to shoot the promotional photography for Orlando, which you may have seen around the city last year in posters. What I hope this illustrates is that not only the importance of meeting people and knowing people, but that the more work you do as a freelancer, provided you do it well, the more work that will bring. Although I say I've never advertised, I have promoted myself. Self-promotion can sometimes be distasteful, and sometimes I'm disgusted at myself when I'm introduced to someone and I'm thinking, how can this person help me make money? The fact is though, it's necessary to make a living as a freelancer. If I have any advice about this, it would just be to create a website, print business cards, lots of them, and give them to everyone you know. I was once commissioned by someone who saw my business card on a pinboard in their cousin's house. Their cousin was an old school friend of mine. I mentioned creating a website, one with your own domain name, because it looks professional and image and reputation are important. I mentioned that people always ask when I tell them I'm a photographer, do you do that full time? I can't remember whether I ever lied about that, but when I was let go from my job in the law office, I was relieved that I could say yes to that question. Not for reasons of vanity or pride, but because it's difficult to be taken seriously otherwise. Everybody has a friend who's handy with a camera, or maybe even won a competition or something, but large companies probably won't commission anything from an amateur or a semi-pro, no matter how talented. If you are a semi-pro with a part-time job, I'm not encouraging you to lie, just be aware that however disagreeable you may find it, image and reputation are very important. Photography is more competitive now than ever. The internet has presented so many opportunities for the freelance photographer, but technological advances have also had their negative side. There are more talented amateurs than ever, which is a good thing of course, but there are companies ready to take advantage of them. When I receive a request to use a photo or for a commission which says we wouldn't be able to pay you but you'd be credited, I generally send an email back which says that the offer is an insult to me, to my work, and to the profession of photography as a whole. Because if an organisation whether it's a magazine, a newspaper, a fashion label, or a modelling agency, is commercial, that is, it exists to make money, and it wants to use your photography as a means to promote its ability to make money, then it should pay for it. That said, there are exceptions. When I was starting out, I did a lot of work for free, and still from time to time do work at discounted rates for various reasons. But it's important to consider whether you're doing someone a favour which they're likely to repay you in the future, or whether you're just being exploited. Being published is good for exposure, but don't let that fool you unless the exposure is seriously large in scale. But then again, if their circulation is that big, then they can definitely afford to pay for photography. In William McIlvaney's novel, Law, he writes that there are two basic kinds of professionalism. There's the professionalism that does something well enough to earn a living from it, and there's the professionalism that creates a commitment so intense that the earning of a living is a means to promote its ability to make money, then it should pay for it. That said, there are exceptions. When I was starting out, I did a lot of work for free, and still from time to time do work at discounted rates for various reasons. But it's important to consider whether you're doing someone a favour which they're likely to repay you in the future, or whether you're just being exploited. Being published is good for exposure, but don't let that fool you unless the exposure is seriously large in scale. But then again, if their circulation is that big, then they can definitely afford to pay for photography. In William McIlvanny's novel, Law, he writes that there are two basic kinds of professionalism. There's the professionalism that does something well enough to earn a living from it, and there's the professionalism that creates a commitment so intense that the earning of a living happens by the way. When I first read this, it stuck in my mind because I thought that the second kind of professionalism summed up well how I arrived where I am. That said, I've been lucky, but in any case, if you're planning to freelance, I wouldn't advise doing it the way that I've done it. If you plan to freelance, then at some point you have to make the decision to pack in your job and dedicate yourself to being a photographer. I was too impatient, too reckless, and too overconfident to take this advice, but don't make that leap until you have a healthy safety net in the bank, say 3 to 6 months living costs. There are things that you can do that I was too lazy or afraid to do, like young person's business startup grants and things like that. Working for yourself has its perks, but it's the scariest thing I've ever done, and I have to wake up every day and face that fear. The struggle is not to let it paralyse you. Don't be scared about the safety of your equipment, because if you keep your camera in a drawer, you're never going to take any photographs. Don't be scared about what others will think. For 2 years I scraped by and was ashamed that I had to move home with my parents and listen to them nagging me to get a job with a steady income, and I had to hang my head in shame when I went back to friends and said, can I borrow more money? It could have easily gotten out of control. But that said, if you have passion enough to live with that kind of uncertainty, then go for it. And if you don't make a career in photography. Find something that you do have the passion for and do that instead. Before I wrap up, I'll answer the one question that I get asked on a daily basis by friends, acquaintances, and emails from strangers. Which camera should I buy? The short answer is I don't know. But my advice is that unless you can be bothered carrying around a digital SLR most of the time, don't buy one. Just get a good compact or hybrid camera instead. If you're buying a digital SLR, go into a camera shop, ask them to hold a Nikon and a Canon one, because I use Nikon, but I'm sure they're just as good as each other, and just see which one feels best for you. Sony and Olympus also make digital SLRs, but I've never met a pro who doesn't use Nikon or Canon. Then once you've decided on your brand, basically you get what you pay for, so just buy as far as your budget can take you. There's a resource online for advice on which cameras and lenses to buy, kenrockwell.com, and it's excellent. So I realise that I've talked more about business than the philosophy or the art of photography, but I hope you've enjoyed it, and I leave you with these wise words that I read somewhere. The amateur worries about equipment, the professional worries about money, but the master worries about light. So if you go professional, don't forget about light. Thanks for listening, and I'll take any questions that you have.